Good evening, everyone. It's that magical time of day where we're coming to you live from my kitchen because that's the best place for it. And I want to welcome you to another episode of Music Chats with myself, Wojtek Malewski. I'm the music director of the Somerville Orchestra. We're so thrilled to be co-hosting another event with our Dorchester County Library partners in crime here. This month's topic is, it's you can argue that it's overdone. We've talked about this guy enough in history. But you don't know everything, and you don't know some of the juiciest stuff. So there used to be a show on I think it was VH1, called Behind the Music. And you learned a lot about different bands that you loved. You know, the stuff that they don't tell you when you're at the concert. Guess what we're going to do? Yeah, you guessed it. You're right. We're going to do our very own SOs Behind the Music. So join me, won't you? Won't you just join me for it? So I'm pretty sure it should be showing up now on your screen, this presentation. My co-host here, Miss Elizabeth Neal, can confirm or deny that. Miss Elizabeth, is this showing up on your screen?
It is, yeah.
Well, very good. Is it showing up as full screen or like kind of not full screen?
Not full screen.
That's odd. Here we go. How about now? There's a slight bit of a lag, but I'm assuming it will because I know exactly what I'm looking at here. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. SO1's Behind the Music, Beethoven Unplugged. I'm so excited. Let's dive right in. Like I said, this is a bit of the stuff you don't hear every day. So this isn't going to be your run-of-the-mill educational Beethoven series. We are going to tell you some of the important things here. Now, this picture of a man, Mr. Ludwig van Beethoven, is pretty accurate. A man who tirelessly works day in, day out, disheveled, papers everywhere. There's a cello there, which is interesting because he was mostly a violinist and a violist on top of playing the piano. But the image of him kind of with that demeanor and workaholic and pages everywhere, pretty fitting. So let's get to know this man behind the music because there's a lot in there. And before we get started, I'd love to actually get your take on who you think this guy is. What have you heard about Beethoven? What do you know about Mr. Ludwig van Beethoven? I'd love to know where we're starting at because I think I'm going to blow your minds a little bit, but maybe not all the way. So why don't you let me know what you know already? In the meantime, while I wait for Liz's feedback on your questions, we are going to get going here because we have so much to cover today and there's not a lot of time. Part 1, Young LVB. I'm going to call him LVB. Why? Because that's his initials. Very good. Okay, Part 1. That's a lovely oil painting of him in his youth. Look at those very piercing eyes. Tough childhood and tough years. So this is really kind of at the heart of who Beethoven is and what Beethoven is, and also kind of what made him special, I think. So let's talk about it. So he was born December 16th, 1770 in Bonn, Germany. Don't worry if you don't know where that is. I'm going to show you a map in a second. His name is of Dutch heritage, hence the von. So people thought that this was some sort of hint that he was of noble birth. Not really. It just means from. And Beethoven, believe it or not, means beet farm. Fans of The Office, you know who that reminds you of. With a guy with German descent that's a beet farmer. That's right, Mr. Dwight Schrute, a.k.a. Ludwig van Beethoven. The two are kind of similar in many regards, I think. But anyway, we're getting off topic here. This isn't about The Office. This is about Beethoven. So he was, you can already tell where his family's from, what his heritage is, obviously coming from a beet farming background at some point in their life. But Beethoven's family was quite musical. His grandfather shares his same name, Ludwig van Beethoven. He was a bass singer and Kapellmeister at the court of Clemens August. Now, a Kapellmeister is basically a music director, so he had a pretty high title in that court. His father, his being our Ludwig, the one that we know, the really, really famous one, his name was Johann van Beethoven, and he was a tenor. He was also a keyboard and violin instructor. He would do those to supplement income, and he was also Ludwig's first music teacher. That's right. Very tough teacher. Very, very tough teacher. So, interestingly enough, his grandfather, Ludwig, was a very successful musician, and he was actually a very good musician. His father, on the other hand, kind of mediocre. And it is something that I think always plagued him and something that he would pass on to Ludwig in a certain different way. I don't think Johann ever really got to a place where his father was proud of him, and I don't think he ever got to a place in his career where he was proud of himself. And I think he unfortunately took that out on young little Ludwig. Let's just dive ahead here so I can show you where bon is. Bon in French means good. So anyway, this is starting off pretty well. But this is kind of where Bonn is on the map of Europe. You can kind of see here, western part of Germany, close to the border of Belgium and the Netherlands. Hence, the Flemish and the Dutch background actually makes a lot of sense. They're pretty much right there. How many of you actually knew this? I'm curious. How many of you knew that Beethoven had a Dutch background and that his name had anything to do with beet farming? I'm curious. If you knew that, I would love to hear in the comments. And if you didn't know that, please tell me how much I just blew your mind. Very good. But this map is going to be pretty important. I might come back to it, but I'd urge you to memorize two spots on this map, where Paris is and where Vienna is. Those are going to be our important points in today's little journey through Europe. So just remember where those two spots are on the map here. Okay, all right, let's jump ahead here. This is a terrible map, clearly, but this is one that shows you what the map of Europe looked like in 1770. So big shout out to my Polish people over there, looking pretty good. One of the largest countries in Europe at the time. Unfortunately, 2 years after Beethoven's birth, it would be torn apart. Anyway, but as you can see, Germany was a hot mess of little kind of principal states, and it was kind of in transition. There was a lot going on. This is also a massive period of upheaval in Europe. And I'm bringing this up because I think it's going to play in a lot into Beethoven's life and his influence and his music and who he was as a musician. And I think those two have to be linked together, and they're often kind of not. We just kind of think of him as an isolated musician, like in a little box. But where he grew up and how he grew up with what was happening around him is massively influential. So, jumping ahead. The next Mozart, question mark? Like I said, his first music lessons began at age 5. His father taught him the keyboard. It was very, very intense. So, you've all heard of these like very strict piano teachers that like slap your hands when you play a wrong note. Well, like amp that up to like level 10 or 11, and that's basically his father's style of pedagogy. He was also a notorious alcoholic and drunk, unfortunately, and so he would sometimes come home absolutely drunk and make Ludwig play piano for him. And then we're talking like 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning, 12 at night. So, piano became a very kind of harsh thing. But at the same time he was learning piano, his father actually had him learning violin and viola from another teacher. And he actually supplemented his own teaching with another piano instructor, Mr. Tobias Pfeiffer. Interestingly enough, Pfeiffer's pedagogy was really weird because he was a massive insomniac, and so he would literally drag Ludwig out of bed to play piano. I mean, we're talking a 5-year-old, getting them out of bed at like 3 or 4 in the morning so they could practice. And this was like, the level of discipline and requirement was pretty incredible. There was times where Ludwig would play a wrong note or a few wrong notes, or he just wouldn't play to his father's satisfaction, and they'd lock him in the basement, believe it or not. So this is a very, very strict time, and this is going to have a huge impact on him going forward, hence I'm spending a little bit of time on it. And I think the reason why, I think his father was probably making up for his own not getting to where he wanted to in his career, but he also saw what happened to a young Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and his father, and he saw how Leopold basically made Mozart a star and how much they profited off of it. So I think he not only wanted to kind of, there's probably some projecting of his own desires of successful musicianship, but the financial aspect was pretty nice and appealing. So that sets the stage a little bit. His first public performance, he was 7 years old, the same age as Mozart, but his father claimed he was 6. He's trying to one-up him. You got it. You're trying to one-up him. But thankfully, his father pushed him to do so because in the audience was probably the most influential teacher, that's a hard thing to say, in attendance for young little Ludwig, and that is Christian Neef. He's going to become one of the most important pedagogues in his life. So Young childhood is very, very tough. Very, very, very tough. Into young adulthood, this is actually a pretty cool oil painting here that's not actually often seen. I'm curious if any of you have ever seen this painting of young Beethoven, but let me know in the comments if you have or not. But like I said, it took a toll on Ludwig. He actually became a loner. He became kind of socially distant, distrustful of others. He didn't really have many friends. And so this, like, the harsh, intense pedagogy only intensified this, and he was often seen with a very kind of sour expression, very kind of blank-faced, didn't really focus, couldn't really succeed in school. And so it's interesting because for many kids, I think, at this age, music would become something they detest and hate because they get punished for it. You know, you're being forced to do this thing. But interestingly enough, Beethoven went the opposite way. He completely threw himself into music, thankfully for us. He didn't reject it because of the intense pedagogy. He, in fact, embraced it. And there was something in it that really spoke to him, that he wanted to get better at, that really, really drove him. And that's pretty amazing when you think of how intense his pedagogy was. 4 different teachers at age 5, first public performance age 6, trying to follow in Mozart's footsteps. A lot of things for a little kid. So you'd think that he would be distanced from it, but he wasn't. So do we have a question? Be warned. Oh, okay. All right. Is it too loud? Oh, very good. I was told I have to move my mic. Therefore, I'm moving my mic. All right. Very good. Was it too loud?
It was just popping.
Popping. Oh,
You know,
I need my pop filter here. Anyway, that's okay. What?
it looks funny on the screen.
I see. Very good. Okay. All right. Moving right along here. So learning the masters and breaking free. Like I mentioned, Christian Neef was in attendance, and so Neef kind of took over teaching a young Beethoven, and he introduced him to the music of the masters. So we're talking J.S. Bach, but even more importantly, Joseph Haydn. And Joseph Haydn is going to come back later and actually be Beethoven's teacher as well. So this is pretty incredible. It's going to come full circle in a matter of years. By age 10, Beethoven had quit school to pursue music full-time. I'll just put that into perspective. By age 10 years old, he quit school. And his parents obviously let him because his father wanted him to be the next Mozart. So that all is well and good in this day and age. By age 11, Beethoven had mastered the well-tempered clavier. For those of you that don't know what that is J.S. Bach's famous book of keyboard solos. So he had a prelude and a fugue in every major key, every minor key, 16 in each book, 2 books, 32 pieces essentially. Prelude and fugue in each. Incredibly difficult book, but he mastered it by age 11. So that shows you how much he played and how much pedagogy he actually received to actually get to that point. So by age 11, he's at where I would say maybe like college age students are these days. I don't know, but either way, it's pretty impressive. By age 12, he was an assistant organist to Neef. By age 14, he took on a paid position as assistant organist. And at age 16, his teacher, Christian Neef, actually banded together a group of aristocrats from Bonn to sponsor him so he could go to Vienna, the musical capital of the world. Also happens to be where Mozart lived, so his father was probably very happy about that. But anyway, so around the same time that he was being sponsored to go to Vienna, I want to put this into perspective because we're talking age 16, so we're talking 1786. Put that into perspective for yourself, and I put that on the bottom of this slide. For context, the American Revolution happened in 1776, and the French Revolution is a few years away. So we're talking the height of the Enlightenment. And as we all know, the Enlightenment was a time that emphasized individualism rather than traditionalism. The ideas of liberty, democracy, free thinking, people like Descartes and Erasmus were all kind of humanistic. It was all individualistic, and that's basically the main point I'm trying to get to. This brand new way and concept of thinking really, really spoke to Beethoven, and so he would really become a big fan and a big champion of these Enlightenment ideals. That's going to really carry over into who he is as a person, but also into his music, and I cannot overstate that enough. So we're painting a picture here. By age 16, he's about to go to, at that point, the equivalent of like New York City. in Europe, being sponsored, but he's also this kind of rebellious teenager with a pretty, severely intense, harsh young childhood, and it was very, very harsh. So just set that stage for you. And I want you just to think of what that all means for a young 16-year-old Beethoven. He's 16 at this point. I can't emphasize that enough. The Viennese years. So before Vienna, I mentioned he was sponsored to go there. So he actually goes there in 1787. Believe it or not, he meets Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, the one and only. He actually played piano for him, and almost certainly took a few lessons with him. There's some accounts that say that, Mozart walked out of the room when Beethoven started playing, that he was so in awe of his playing. We don't know how accurate that actually is. We were pretty sure more and more that that's just kind of like overly romanticized to make it sound really, really nice. But suffice it to say, the facts are he did meet Mozart, but sadly, it would be the last time the two would ever be face to face. It's only a 2-week period, but they did meet. The trip lasted only 2 weeks. Why? Because he had to go back to Bonn to tend to his mother. She was unfortunately in very ill health, dying of tuberculosis, unfortunately, and she did eventually die of tuberculosis. And actually, this is around the exact same time that we have the first surviving letter from Beethoven, and it really describes the melancholy kind of events of the summer, his own ill health, the depression that he was in, lack of financial resources. Those of you that are in the music industry, reading that line, like the ill health, depressed, lack of financial resources, welcome to the music industry, right? No different for young Mr. Ludwig van Beethoven. And so it was a really, really rough time for him. And his mother was really the one that balanced out his father. His father was very strict, very harsh, obviously a borderline abusive, very intense personality, but his mother was very much the opposite, and she was very compassionate. She never really changed her expression, but she was always there for him, and she was always someone he can rely on. And so this was actually a very, very tough time for him, losing that stability and rock in his family. 2 years later, in the span of those 2 years, it's important to say, after his mother's death, that his father actually succumbed even more to his alcoholism. And so it got to such a bad place that his voice started to go as a singer. His skill set as a musician started to go because he just wasn't keeping it up. And young Beethoven realized this, and he noticed it. And so at age 18, he petitioned the courts for half of his father's salary to support the family. The family being his father, himself, and his 2 younger brothers. So this is an incredible act of self-assertion that needs to be kind of said, and I don't think is really ever talked about in Beethoven's life. But to me, it's kind of like him coming into his own. And when you talk about the Enlightenment completely influencing him, who he is as a person, to get him to this point, where at age 18 he's already standing up for who he is as a person, and he's going to be the one to lead the family. That's pretty big. At this time, not only did he have half his father's salary, but he also then played viola in the court orchestra to make additional income. Ironically, he did learn viola as a child, but he didn't really keep up with it as much as piano and violin. So he didn't really know it very well, but he learned it very quickly. Shocking. But so he was able to supplement the income that way. He taught a few kids here and there. But a very, very emotionally difficult time. As you can imagine, like you kind of just stood up for your family. It's a lot going on for the young little dude. So a lot going on. But, thankfully for us, out of this comes one of probably the most important pieces of music that's not really played that much, I should say, and that is the cantata on the death of Joseph II, Emperor Joseph II, who was actually a huge proponent of the Enlightenment, was a kind of a reformer in and of itself, and so his passing was kind of symbolic, not only politically and socially in Europe, around Europe, but to Beethoven on a personal level, with how much he identified with the Enlightenment and how important it was to him. So I actually want to play you a bit of this cantata because it's not, like I said, it's not often played. It was only recently discovered, And I would love to be able to play you a bit of that. So hang on a second. I'm in the wrong window here. There we go. There we are. So here is Dame Kiri Takanawa singing one of the movements from the cantata on the death of Joseph II. Okay, I think we get the idea, and I think we can also see that Beethoven already at this young age was writing in a style that was pretty different. And the oboe solo is going to be pretty important coming later. As we all know, the Fifth Symphony and that random cryptic small little oboe solo. It's this is kind of sort of where it's arguably comes from. But like I said, the piece is not done often, and the reason why it wasn't even premiered for the ceremony that it was intended for. It wasn't premiered until I think 1888 when it was first discovered. But it has some of Beethoven's most evolved music, for sure. But that means it was also incredibly difficult. And this is a concept that Beethoven would be facing pretty much from here on out to for the rest of his life. His music was very hard to play because he himself was such an incredible performer that to him, anything less than that really couldn't get across what he wanted to say. And so it's argued that the performers actually refused to perform the piece because of how difficult it was. So just put that into context for yourself. Incredibly difficult piece. I can only imagine how difficult it was. So, but yeah, it's a really interesting piece. I'm curious how many of you in the comments could tell me how many of you have actually heard that piece before or another part of that piece. I'd be very curious to know how many of you have heard that before. Please do listen to the whole thing because, like I said, it's way more evolved and mature than we think for a 20-year-old Beethoven. So pretty well done. So in 17... Wait, did I skip a slide? No, I didn't. Before Vienna. Okay, yeah, right. So in 1792, while, mind you, Beethoven is still in Bonn, tending to his family, trying to make things right, Joseph Haydn, who was on his way back to Vienna? Yes. kind of meets him in Bonn and offers to basically say, hey, we need to go. We need to go, and I need to take you there. He offers to tutor Beethoven, and of course Beethoven accepts. And one of Beethoven's biggest supporters in Bonn, Count Waldstein, there's a sonata named after him, by the way, very famous piano sonata, the Waldstein Sonata, writes to him about it. You're going to Vienna in fulfillment of your long frustrated wishes. With the help of assiduous labor, you shall receive Mozart's spirit from Haydn's hands. Incredible, incredible, incredible. So he kind of took this mantle up, and I don't think he ever really wanted or intended to kind of take on what his father wanted him to be, like the next Mozart, but he certainly wanted to follow in his footsteps because he wanted to be the best. And so he wanted to do that through performance, not really composition. That really wasn't his intention, wasn't his goal. He preferred performing. That's also not often known about Beethoven, is that we know him as a composer now. That's how we remember him. But he really was, for the first part of his life until about 1800, really primarily a performer. And so when he gets to Vienna, he also studied with some pretty big names, and I put them down here. Antonio Salieri, the same one who, we've all seen the movie Amadeus, and Salieri plays a pretty big role in that movie. It's not all of it's true, but obviously very, very famous court musician, one of the most influential, very, very famous, obviously in his abilities to write Italian vocal operas. And so, interestingly enough, Beethoven studied specifically Italian vocal compositional style. Now that's pretty important because what we just heard is a cantata, which is a voice piece. Essentially, it's a piece for voice and orchestra. And here he wanted to study with Salieri about how to write for the voice. What's not talked about a lot, and we don't have time to get into it today, sadly, but I want you to go researching it on your own, is I want you to listen to Beethoven's vocal music and his choral music, everything he writes for the voice, because it's actually some of the most beautiful music that he's ever written. And I think, to me personally, some of his best music that he's ever written. But we saw some of that in the cantata. He also studied counterpoint and violin, so he kept a lot of things going on at the same time. He's obviously studying composition, piano, violin. There's a lot going on. Interestingly, when he gets to Vienna, it's sort of almost like a flashback. His father actually passes away, and Beethoven refuses to go to the funeral. He refuses to go to Bonn. Mind you, this is also, you remember where Bonn was on the map of Europe? I asked you to remember that. And a big reason why he also didn't want to go back is because that's kind of in the middle of the French Revolution, and it was dangerously close to those French borders. So that's a part of the reason he didn't want to go back into this kind of massive turmoil. Vienna's kind of further east. He's much safer there. But the largest reason was he just didn't want to go to his father's funeral. Obviously, he did not really like the man. I don't want to say he hated the man, but he obviously resented him. And so he refused to go. So obviously, again, a lot of emotional things happening to Beethoven all at once at the same time. But while he was there, he kind of was determined with performing and taking over Mozart's kind of empty throne since, I forgot to mention that Mozart passed away in 1791. So like right before Beethoven gets to Vienna, Mozart passes away. And so we have the throne is left empty. Who's going to fill it, essentially? And young Beethoven says, I shall. He gets there and he basically tells himself, I'm going to win over the nobles. And his style and presentation was really far from normal for the Viennese aristocracy. So I put this picture in, this oil painting in here to kind of show you what he kind of should have looked like. Like they probably made this look like really, really nice. Like, he's got a really nice formal scarf here and his hair's like really nicely tidy. It's not really true. And the image of him with unkept hair is very, very true. Gruff manner, he had a quiet demeanor, and his skin was actually marked with pox. He actually apparently had smallpox at one point, and so he actually had like pox on his skin. So his presence, you can only imagine, this guy with this really stern look on his face, with unkept hair. And apparently his skin was a bit dark. There's questions that have surfaced recently about Beethoven's background and ethnicity. Is he actually of mixed race background? And that's kind of, it's amazing. It's all coming to light now, but suffice it to say, he did have darker skin. Apparently his friends called him the Sicilian for it. But we just don't know where that exactly is, or at least I don't know. Maybe there are some answers out there, but I don't know personally. Anyway, he was very assertive, he was very aggressive, he was very intense, and so he pretty much represented everything that the aristocracy was not, everything that Mozart and Haydn was not. He took it upon himself to make music not this like fun, means of like enjoyment. He wanted to make it an intensely emotional thing, and he got that across with his playing style. Obviously, he also chose incredibly difficult repertoire to perform, and that was going to make him the stuff of legends. Unfortunately for him, that also made his ego grow. Whew, there you go. Ego grow quite a lot. And we've all heard the very famous Beethoven quote by now. To play a wrong note is not important. To play without passion is inexcusable. And that kind of ties into Beethoven at this point in time. He was really so focused on getting the character and the emotion of the music out. That was most important to him. So, here's a question. Looking at a little timeout here. Do you think that Beethoven successfully succeeded Mozart, based on what you just heard? So I kind of set the stage for you a little bit. He's obviously an elite performer at this level, studying with the best of the best, like Haydn and Salieri. He has so much experience. Do you think, at this point, that Beethoven succeeded Mozart? Let us know in the comments. Get those comments in. I gotta see them. I gotta have them. And while you are writing that, I'm just going to quickly say thank you all for joining us. I'm very thankful that you're all spending your Wednesday evening with us. I'm very grateful. I'm sure Elizabeth is as well. She's shaking her head. She's nodding her head. Yes, she is. Very good. I want to thank you very, very much. So now that you've all typed clearly, Alyssa's going to let me know because there's a bit of a lag and a delay. So I'm going to keep going. And if we have any questions, I'm going to come back right to it. So,
just for the record,
yes.
I would say yes.
Okay, Elizabeth says yes, that Beethoven did succeed Mozart. I would say yes as well, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. He's a growing star, that's what he is. So his really kind of unconventional style completely won over a ton of nobles and like aristocrats. So some of these names are going to be very important later for him. Count Lichnowsky, Prince Joseph Lobkowitz, and Baron Gottfried von Sweden. These are incredibly important names. They would become Beethoven's financial support. Not only financial though, they would become like all of his support. And so Beethoven, in thanks to this, dedicated a lot of pieces to them, including I think the first symphony was actually dedicated to von Sweden. I don't remember that, but either way. They pretty much said, here, take our money, you do whatever you need to with it, because whatever you're doing, we like it and it's working and we want more of it, essentially was the message that he received. But Beethoven always wanted to make it really clear that, like, yeah, you can't just, like, buy me. Like, you can give me all that money, but, like, I ain't yours, you know what I mean? So he always had this really kind of divide. He never really got too close to these people. There's a very famous quote of him actually saying, he once apparently left in such a rage, and he yelled back at Count Lichnowsky. He said, "There are many Count Lichnowskys, but there is only one Beethoven." Oh, dang. Shots fired. But that kind of speaks to where Beethoven's ego was kind of headed, and that's actually the next point on my slide here. And it started growing to such a point that he would challenge Europe's greatest pianists to like duels, like not like shooting duels, but like piano duels, dueling pianos, like the playoffs. And essentially, like nobody could really match his skill. He really wanted to show Vienna, I am the dude. I am the next Mozart, or not even the next Mozart. I'm just Beethoven. At this point, I'm assuming he was like, I ain't even the next anyone. I'm just me. And it's quite true. He was a very unique character. And in this time, there's a lot of really, really famous repertoire that I just don't have time to play for you, but the Pathétique Sonata, the famous piano sonata is very important. His first string quartets come from this time, piano trios, and there's even more important repertoire there. So take a listen to it if you haven't yet. Take a listen. It's very, very good stuff from that time period. Very turmoil. But ironically, around the same time he was getting to the height of his like physical playing, like the universe was again conspiring against him, because there's a letter from 1801 that he writes to a friend of, I think it's Vegler. I never remember if it's Vegler or Vengler. Doesn't matter. A friend of his who was actually a medical professional. He writes to him that he feels he's beginning to go deaf. It's a secret that he kept for many years from everyone around him, his closest friends, especially his closest friends, but anyone. And it was apparently starting to really impact him and get to him mentally. Hence why he wrote this letter. He was worried that it was finally starting to kind of become permanent. He thought, I just had these massive pains before, and I lost my hearing for like a day or two. I didn't think much of it, but now it's starting to get this ringing in my ear. And so this affected him on so many levels. Professionally, obviously, he's starting to get, his ego's kind of getting checked a little bit. Socially, he distanced himself from the public eye. And he was obviously scared to face the many enemies he made through these duels and, piano playoffs. He was also apparently hiding from people because he never wanted to admit to anyone that he was going deaf. And he said, if I were in public, I would need to tell someone, and I don't want to. And so he hid himself. He was a recluse for that reason, which is a kind of a actually really tragic story because we always think of him as like the loner who's like, nah. But he wasn't really like that grouchy. He was just a very troubled guy who didn't want to come face to face with the reality that he's probably going to come off of this pinnacle of the mountain that he's on right now. Yet, and there, at the same time, ironically, there was hope. He was madly in love with a woman named Giulietta Giucardi, who he actually dedicated the Moonlight Sonata to. For those of you that don't know the Moonlight Sonata, don't worry. I have a thing to play for you here. You may have heard that name before, and for good reason. And here is Claudio Arrau, and I'm going to start this recording on the third movement of the Moonlight. And I'm going to come back and play the first movement that I'm sure you already know. Here's the third movement of the Moonlight. I think we get the idea there. That's the famous third movement. Very hard to play, by the way, and marked presto. I had the lovely opportunity to hear that this past weekend. I was judging the Charleston Sonatina Festival, so I want to thank the Charleston Academy of Music for having me out as a judge for that. I was lucky enough to have heard that movement a few times by some very, very talented young pianists. So thank you very much for that, Charleston Academy of Music. And here is the first movement, the one you all probably know. I think we all know that piece and love that piece. I know I do. One of the first things I ever learned by Beethoven. One of the first things I think many kids and young performers are taught. The other one being, of course, Fürlies. If you don't know that one, I don't know where you've been, but I'm just kidding. But so obviously he was in a very weird spot because he had this love for this woman who, by the way, did not love him back. It's like kind of like whatever, dude. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's kind of like he didn't really quite know that. But he had hope at least. There's at least a positive in his eyes. But he was dealing with this deafness, this kind of inevitable deafness. And so we get to 1802. Oh, is my mic still too low? No? Is it?
It's
It's rebounding.
It's like echoing.
Oh my goodness gracious. How about now? Hopefully that's better. I know there's a lag, so you'll tell me in about 5 seconds. But we get to 1802, and that's the famous Heiligenstadt Testament. And this is a very famous document. You probably have heard about it. I do want to mention it. It's basically an account of his despair to his two other brothers. His despair over deafness. He has contemplated suicide at this point. His fighting to overcome these physical ailments. It was a big turning point in his life and his compositional style as well. You started to notice that his pieces had a lot more of, I guess, tension is the best word to use in it. And mind you, 1802. So we're talking the first and second symphony have already been written. So we're getting to the point where we're about to get into like the third symphony, the Eroica, the fourth, the fifth. As we all know, it's the famous fate knocking on the door. But an incredibly powerful document because we know that by 1802 he was fully losing his hearing. And he was in an incredibly fragile emotional state because of it, unfortunately. So, speaking of women that he loved, I think it's important to say, now mind you, this is the part in the typical Beethoven lecture where you keep going with his life and you tell these other things about these other things, but we don't have time for that. We got to get to the good stuff. This is behind the music, everyone. This is Immortal Beloved time, all right? Now, there is a very famous letter that he wrote to his immortal beloved, and there's so much speculation as to who that refers to. Let me go back a slide. Let me remind you that he was madly in love with this Giulietta Giucardi. And so, she's one of the candidates for this immortal beloved, and it was such a mystery. And in fact, you see here on the left side of the screen, the Beethoven biography that they made into a movie was actually called Immortal Beloved. So typical Hollywood, they have to make a Beethoven biography more exciting by adding a love story into it. But anyway, it's a great movie. I highly recommend you go watch it. I'll play you a clip from it a little later on, so don't worry. You'll get a sneak peek at it. But it does tell Beethoven's life story, an amazing performance by Gary Oldman. But this question of who the Immortal Beloved is has haunted musicologists for years. And so it comes from an 1812 letter, and basically there's a cryptic addressee. There's no date on it, but now they've done like evidence of they've kind of date tested it. But it's addressed to my immortal beloved. Like, what? And apparently this letter was written at different times with like weird language into it. And so there's been a lot of speculation as to who this could possibly be about. So I want to just give you this brief list here of who these people could possibly be. Antonie Brentano, Josephine Brunswick were the main two for a number of years, but the others include all of the names listed there. I'm not even going to read them all because that's a lot for my mouth to do right now. There's a lot of syllables and consonants, but you get the point. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 listed here. But there was more. There was more candidates that could fit this Immortal Beloved title. What? But seriously, all the single ladies. Elizabeth just told me. All the single ladies. Which one is going... It feels like an episode of The Bachelor to me, let's go back a slide here, because we got a little rose there at the bottom of the Immortal Beloved movie poster right there. I don't know if my mouse is coming up on the screen, but a little rose, that's The Bachelor right here, and the Bachelorettes. That's my little connection to social TV programs. Anyway, so I actually took this off of Wikipedia. I found this hysterical. I'm not going to expect you to read all this, but they did a text analysis of 13 unknown love letters by Beethoven. And so they kind of analyzed when he uses certain words in what letters, and they kind of matched it. And so for a long time, the moral of the story with this really long slide here is that they all thought, it's got to be Josephine. The way he's writing, it's got to be Josephine. There's no doubt. Well, until there was doubt. And there's a lot of doubt when Anton Schindler, a good friend of Beethoven, wrote a biography of the composer, and he actually named someone completely else. Hey, you remember that name, Giulietta Giucardi? Yeah, Schindler named her as the Immortal Beloved. But then other research shows that that's not entirely true because that was basically a name given to Schindler by Franz von Brunswick to distract any suspicion away from his sister Josephine. Oh, hey, there's some drama happening in Beethoven world, all right? Okay, all right. Now, mind you, that she's not even the only Brunswick sister that was a candidate of the Immortal Beloved. There was speculation that Beethoven was in love with his other sister Teresa as well. So there's a whole love. It's not even a triangle. It's like a love octagon here. It's like non whatever decagon. Sounds like a Digimon. Oh boy, that was whoops. Anyway, so I just want to point this out because all this entire slide here is going through each potential candidate and why this person is actually this one. Well, you know what? We're going to rule out Teresa here in 1910, and we're going to say that Amelie is the new one. You know what? Okay, no, never mind. That can't be right. That's a hoax. So it's a hot mess, everyone. I'm going to save you that trouble. Let's go on. So who is it? Who is it? Is it Antony, Josephine, Julieta, Therese, Marie? It sounds like Mambo Number 5. You know that Lou Bega song? I got Sandra. Anyway. But it's kind of what it feels like to me. If you don't know that song, go listen to it right now. I'll wait. No, I won't. We got to keep going. But so who is it? Who is it? Who is this mystery Immortal Beloved? You know, what's interesting is that the movie itself tells us a completely different story and a different theory as to who it actually is. The movie tells us that the Immortal Beloved, I'm going to try to get this right, is his brother's wife, but then also pointed out as to his brother's wife because it could be their son. The only surviving Beethoven name out of those three brothers, the only one that had a kid was his brother. I think it was Karl. Was it Kaspar? Either way, it's not Johann. There was two other brothers. One of them was named Johann. The other one was named either Karl or Kaspar. I cannot remember right now. It might be both, actually. I don't know. Do you want to go quick Google search? Thank you very much. But basically, the movie tells us that the Immortal Beloved was Karl's or Kaspar's wife or their son. Maybe that's the son's name. I'm confusing it all right now. I don't know. But so the movie takes us on a completely different journey, and it's a beautiful journey, but it's not you know. Or is it? Let's find out. Let's actually play a clip from this. Why don't we? Do you think we should? I think we should. So let's actually go ahead and do that. Obviously an amazing clip. The movie is fantastic, and I apologize, it's a bit laggy. I'm seeing in my software here. I apparently don't have enough internet bandwidth to handle so much amazing things happening. So there's no sound on the clip. Oh, that's not good. Really? Now it's me again. Oh, you know what? Let's go back and play that one more time because apparently there was no sound on it. So let's go ahead and replay that clip for you. I turned the
I
mic
took him
sound
in
up.
when nobody could bear his company.
And now you want to get paid. Bank shares.
Give them to me. The money is mine. Here is his will. I declare that my brothers Caspar and Johann are the heirs to my fortune, if so it can be called. As Caspar is long dead, that leaves me, just me. Well, give me my money. Answer!
This is his final testament.
What?
All my music and all the capital of my estate shall go to my sole heir, my immortal beloved, signed Ludwig von Beethoven. The letter is enclosed.
This is... Come on now, don't keep me in suspense. Who is it? Nobody.
Oh, not so.
The letter bears no name.
To my immortal beloved.
My angel, my all, my other self. The maestro was nursing a secret passion.
I never heard such words from his lips. Who could this be?
Obviously a wonderful clip. I was told that the sound worked that time, so hopefully you were all able to enjoy that this time. I apologize for the sound not working the first time. But let's get back into it. So, who is it? So the question that was just asked at the end of that clip, who is it? Well, let me spare you the suspense. There's an answer. And it's only as of recently, and it's still not 100% sure, but we're 95% sure now that it is Josephine Brunswick, one of the two sisters that their brother Franz tried to tell the other biographer to distract from. Turns out it's most likely the Immortal Beloved, and we have very recent evidence that we've discovered. Yes, we're still discovering evidence about Beethoven's life. So even though he has passed away so many years ago, we're still learning about him, and that's incredible. That helps us as conductors and musicians so much. And so the connection between these two is that Beethoven started teaching her piano in 1799, right around the time that he started losing his hearing, and he was going through a lot of pit of despair, but he apparently was also in love with another person, so... Echo. There's an echo. Hang on. I'm on it. Oh, I know why it didn't work last time. I turned the mic down last time. That's crazy. We know now. It should be good now. But we also know from these recent documents that Beethoven was kind of hopelessly in love with her for many years. So it begs the question, wasn't he kind of in love with the other girl at the same time, around the same time? The other one ended up marrying a count in 1803, and she never really gave him the time of day. But he was sort of developing feelings for her. It seems like he just needed someone. He really needed someone close to him and never really kind of told her. But the recent evidence does show that they likely met up several times through cryptic letters and code words they used. And her travel log actually bears the same kind of timeline to when Beethoven wrote that letter. So through a lot of detective work, it's turning out that Josephine was the most likely Immortal Beloved. So there you go, a little drama solved there. But I tell you, when I was growing up, that was a big question: who was the Immortal Beloved? And like I said, as of 5-10 years ago, we learned that this is the most likely case. So the most obvious suspect is usually the one, right? So that's she was anyway. So it begs the question, and we get to the last part of today's presentation, which is, knowing everything we know, and mind you, I didn't play a lot of music for you today, but hopefully that's okay. Why does he still matter today? Why do we still play his music? This year marks the 250-year anniversary of his birth. Why do we still talk about him? Why is his music still so relevant and still so powerful, so popular? Well, I'd actually love to hear from everyone on this. What do you think? Why do you think that is? Let us know in the comments. And I tried to paint you as accurate of a picture as I could without overly romanticizing anything. I've tried to be very neutral. So I'm curious what you all think. about this. Why do you think that is? And I'll tell you what my thoughts are in a second. I wish I had Jeopardy music right now. Rest in peace, Alex Trebek, by the way. Yeah, sad loss for all of us, obviously. But yeah, I'm curious what everyone thinks, and I'll tell you what my idea is. Beethoven is sometimes seen as the kind of the pivot point between the classical and the Romantic era. The Romantic era is the one we associate most closely with individualism and emotion being tied to music and individual thoughts and ideas, programmatic music, elements like that. And Beethoven really was the first one to really take that idea and run with it. And that's why he is considered that pivot point. But he really was a rock star. Yeah, he played music that was incredibly challenging, but at a really high level. He wrote music that was very challenging, that was completely different from what came before him, and really after him for a while too. We always hear about composers living in the shadow of Beethoven. That really was true, because what he wrote and some of his really out there things were really out there. There's actually a period of his life where he was experimenting with different compositional techniques. In fact, there's a quartet called the Serioso Quartet for strings that the CSO, the Charleston Symphony, is going to be performing in a few weeks. But that is basically him experimenting with completely different compositional styles. And so the reasons why I think his music speaks to us is because he, a product of the Enlightenment, was a free thinker, a liberated mind who wanted to get his full emotions into music. And so when we unify the person with the music, we get a really complete view. And it's really powerful stuff, because his music, even though it was written about political events of the time, there's the famous story of him in the Eroica Symphony. He originally dedicated that symphony to Napoleon, but as we all know, he scratched that name out after he learned what a complete dictator and ruthless kind of conquistador little Napoleon was, who, by the way, wasn't that little. He was 5'9". Anyway, Tom Cruise height. Anyway, getting off topic here, but his ideas, I think his music, speak to all of us still today, because we can identify so much with everything that he's gone through. We can, I think, all identify with at least some part of his emotional struggles, maybe some physical ailments as well. His lack of finding a partner in life, the things that kept tormenting him, his fall from fame, but also his ride back into it. I think we can relate a lot to his story and his journey, and I think his music completely illustrates that. And he was able to capture his emotion and his being into his music better than anyone before him. It also doesn't hurt that his music was incredibly quotable, very memorable. And so, in fact, I'm going to start with this clip right here. We're going to start with the rock clip, and I'm going to play you probably his most famous clip, but it's one of my all-time favorite pieces of music. Absolutely. But you all know that. Da, 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 da. It's probably the most famous bunch of notes in a row that have ever been written down, and they're so simple. But that is basically the epitome of Beethoven. He was able to simplify things on such a level that were so memorable, yet they were so powerful and contained so much in them. And so for that reason, his music is often pretty... Another echo? Dang. And so for that reason, his music is pretty well, you remember it fairly easily And because of that, you can use it really easily. So I actually want to play you one of his most powerful compositions. Where did that piece go? I must have gotten rid of it somehow. Uh-oh. Well, that's not good. Let me find it really quickly. That's awkward. I must have closed that window by accident, so give me 1 second here. Let's see if we can find it here. There it is. Oh, maybe it is that one. No, I think it's this one. Let's see. Hopefully it works. Hopefully it works, everyone. My internet's spotty. You know what? We'll come back to it. We have other things to get to right now. But I mentioned that his music is so quotable and so singable. And I also mentioned before Fur Elise and how popular Fur Elise is. Well, there's a really famous rapper, Nas. You may have heard of Nas, but he has a piece called I Can. And funnily enough, it speaks, I think, directly to who Beethoven was. And it's a really kind of positive, uplifting message of I can. But he quotes Beethoven in it, and I don't think that's by accident. So here is Nas, excuse me, with his piece, I Can.
Listen up, you can be anything in the world, and God we trust. An architect, doctor, maybe an actress, but nothing comes easy, it takes much practice. Like, I met a woman who's becoming a star. She was very beautiful, leaving people in awe, singing songs Lena Horne, but the younger version. Hung with the wrong person, got her strung on that heroin, cocaine, sniffing up drugs, all in the nose. Could have died so young, now...
All right, you get the idea. Obviously, Nas's message, you can be whatever you want to be. I can. It's pretty powerful. So I want to actually get back into this real quickly. So I've already played you a few little clips, and these are just different ways people have used his actual music. I'm not even playing you the originals because I think you know the originals. There's another really cool one that I want to play for you, and it's by a rock group called Bright Eyes. And this is a song called Road to Joy. That's right. Road to Joy. You can only imagine what they used in this piece. That's right, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the Ode.
The sun came up with no conclusions, flowers sleeping in their beds, the city cemeteries humming, I'm wide awake, it's morning. I have my drugs, I have my woman, they keep away my loneliness. My parents, they have their religion, but sleep in separate houses.
We get the idea there. That's Bright Eyes, Road to Joy. Really cool piece. Very unique, actually, as well. I don't even know for how long. Oh, man.
Since that last song.
I apologize, viewers. That's awkward. I was just told that I had no sound there for that entire thing I just said. For those of you watching, I'm so sorry. But let me repeat that again. Not all of it. I'll be shorter. But the reason why we still talk about Beethoven, I think, is because his ideas have lived on. And his ideas of what he got across in his music live on. Also, his Enlightenment ideas live on. And what he represents. His music is very powerful. It goes across different genres of music. Rock, rap, disco, classical, jazz. There's even a Beethoven opera that's being written. So there's so many things about him that still speak to us, not to mention his music, which we didn't really dive into that much. Today was a very kind of targeted discussion on the man, the person behind the music, his love, his the things he was dealing with, how he grew up. So for those reasons, I think we can kind of paint a very different picture of why we talk about Beethoven today. Like I said, his music speaks for itself, but the other things need some speaking about. So without any further ado, I wanted to just share some of my resources here. Apparently I'm missing a set of quotes that I'm seeing already. Oh, of course I am. But I've used two wonderful documentaries. Of course, I don't expect you to write down this link, but if you're watching this, you can, of course, pause the video and find that as well. I can send this to you if you'd like. But these, if you even want to just search Beethoven documentary A&E or Beethoven documentary Telemusic, they're wonderful resources. The one from Telemusic is actually quite remarkable. Of course, the source on Beethoven is Oxford Online. That is the most up-to-date encyclopedic source that's available to us all. Highly encourage you all to go check that out. And of course, the 3 books on Beethoven are pretty important. The one is Beethoven by Maynard Solomon. It's kind of a standard biography, but some of the things in his book are from a little bit outdated research. So that book is great. It's like 90% great because the other 10% is from recent developments and things like that we found out since that book was written. And 2 other books that are actually in the Dorchester County Library system that are actually at the Somerville branch I have included here. And they are Beethoven, the Man Revealed by John Suchet, who is actually a guest speaker on the A&E documentary. He's on there many, many times. And also Beethoven, His Life and Music by Jeremy Siepman. And those 2 call numbers are right there along with these books. That being said, I also want to let you know that they have much more than just these 2 books at the library. Please go support your library. Please go check them out. These are just the 2 that I have read that I know for a fact are really good. So please go support your library. Please go check out those recordings that they have. They have a lot of resources there that are wonderful and, of course, available to you, the dear public. Speaking of things that are available to you, this recording will be made available to you on the Somerville Orchestra Facebook page. I'm sure that the library will also make that available on their page as well. So you'll be able to watch this back. Don't worry if you're just tuning in, if you're like, oh man, I missed it. You haven't missed a thing. You can watch it later at your own leisure. So with that being said, I want to see if there's any questions or any requests for anything. We've come to that point in the day where we simply must say goodbye because we simply can't be here for hours and hours. As much as I'd like that, believe me, I would. I'd love to sit here and talk music with you all, but don't worry, we can just do it next month. And I'm very, very excited to see you all again next month, where we'll be talking about the music of Tin Pan Alley and how that actually started the Christmas Carol tradition. That will be December 16th. I actually don't have a slide on that, I realized, but I usually do. I forgot to do that. That's okay. I'll tell you right now, December 16th at 6 p.m., Facebook Live, one more time. We'll talk all about how we got all these famous Christmas tunes and where they all actually came from. Tin Pan Alley. Do we have any questions or requests at the current, Elizabeth? No? We have no questions. I've explained everything so well. I see. I'm so good. I'm just kidding. That's my ego getting in the way. Just like Beethoven. Whew, tragic story.
Well, the biggest question, the Immortal Beloved, has been answered. So.
That's true. We have all learned something today, dear viewers. So much drama has been answered. We want to thank you for tuning into the Bachelor 1770 edition. Oh, sorry, I meant SO1's Behind the Music. Thank you so much for joining us, for having a great time this evening with us. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed yourselves, and we will see you again in 1 month. Take care, everyone.